Hello again. I'm Dr. Maggie Meggs, and I'm the director for the Forest Dwelling Program, Spirituality for Our Wisdom Years. This is our third video in the series, Entering the Forest, Something to Get You Started. Let's continue on our journey together into a mature spirituality of aging. I'd like to begin with this prayer from an anonymous 17th century nun. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and yet it points to timeless truths about a conscious versus unconscious spiritual journey through the aging process. Lord, thou knowest better than I know myself that I am growing older and will someday be old. Keep me from the fatal habit of thinking I must say something on every subject and on every occasion. Release me from craving to straighten out everybody's affairs. Make me thoughtful but not moody, helpful but not bossy. With my vast store of wisdom, it seems a pity not to use it all, but thou knowest, Lord, that I want a few friends at the end. Keep my mind free from the recital of endless details. Give me wings to get to the point. Seal my lips on my aches and pains. They are increasing, and love of rehearsing them is becoming sweeter as the years go by. I dare not ask for grace enough to enjoy the tales of others' pain, but help me to endure them with patience. I dare not ask for improved memory, but for a growing humility and a lessening cocksureness when my memory seems to clash with the memories of others. Teach me the glorious lesson that occasionally I may be mistaken. Keep me reasonably sweet. I do not want to be a saint. Some of them are so hard to live with. But a sour old person is one of the crowning works of the devil. Give me the ability to see good things in unexpected places and talents in unexpected people. And give me, O Lord, the grace to tell them so. Amen. I love that prayer. Now, another good resource on the spirituality of aging journey is titled From Aging to Saging. In it, they have depicted the seasons of life by taking the average lifespan in the US, which is 84, dividing it by the number of months in a year, which yields age groupings of 7. We all have a sense of January as a new beginning and December as the ending of a year. It's a quick way to locate yourself in the seasons of life. For example, I started in the Forest Dwelling Program when I was 63, at the very end of September. I'm now close to the end of October, and it cuts through some denial and gives me the nudge to lean into what is important. I'm learning to live differently and make different choices in alignment with this time of deepening autumn. It also encourages me to savor the sweetness of my life now. Having had one hip replaced in 2016, I cherish being able to walk again without pain and only look with a little envy at those ladies in my neighborhood who can speed walk, which was me earlier in life. In terms of when it is time to enter the Forest Dwelling Program, if you're so inclined, people have entered the program in their 50s, in August, if you will, up into the 80s, the December of life. The experience is somewhat different for those in early fall, late fall, and winter, but we find that our graduates are grateful when they encounter some of the challenges of later season. Seeds are planted and they sprout when needed. There's no exact time to enter into the program, but we don't admit people who have not yet moved into the second half of life. This is particularly relevant in the elder circles where people share their experiences of this time of life. As we begin to really confront the fact that we are well past the halfway part of life, we are invited into new ways of living, new ways of being. Finding that our energy and needs are changing, it's time to settle up with some of the hopes and dreams we had for ourselves earlier in life. That was a time when we were driven to prove something, to make our mark on life, or perhaps do everything on a bucket list. It's time to revisit the meaning of this last period of life. Otherwise, we will find that early life's purpose will sour late life's meaning. Connie Zweig makes the point that in successful aging, we are called to grow whole, not just to grow old. And this means realizing that our brokenness is part of our wholeness. Our failures are part of our success. Our burdens are part of our blessings. Don't let the can't-dos become a banner of personal inadequacies. Rather, let them be embraced and befriended as a path to acceptance and serenity. This definitely requires a mature standpoint. I've been working with my therapist to identify what I am tempted to label as my own inadequacies. And as I befriend them, I'm finding an acceptance and a lightness that is most welcome. For example, having been gifted with a vocation that involves sitting one-on-one with people in therapy, I'm more comfortable in that role than in the public role of teaching, of giving talks such as these. Yet, God has called me to a path later in life where I have to do this. It's not easy for me, especially when I initially compared my labored efforts to the ease and ability of our speakers as they teach. Now, I am simply grateful that our core faculty do most of the teaching with the passion and skill of their longtime vocations. As I have faced what has felt like disappointment in myself, I have been miraculously transformed in the process. I still have to work hard to express myself in these ways, but my dis-ease has turned to a more tender appreciation of myself as I serve in new ways. Now, you might want to stop and pause over these questions. Have you been comparing yourself to some ideal or to someone else's gifts? And what's the impact of doing this? What would be a realistic and mature way to change that sense of inadequacy to a mature appreciation of who you are? And what freedom might you experience by doing so? By the way, in her book, The Gift of Years, Joan Chittister writes poignantly about both the burdens and the blessings of this time of life. It's well worth reading. When we have the courage to squarely face the real burdens of our age, we can move into the mature posture of finding the blessings. The burdens are easy to spot, the blessings, not so much. A book I recommend, which gives you a good overview of Father Ron's theology, is titled Ronald Rolheiser, Essential Spiritual Writings by Rolheiser and Alicia Stamwitz. It's part of the Modern Spiritual Masters collection. This quote speaks to where we are headed as we age, into a time when we are invited or thrust into the mellowing process most of us fear, weakness. As Rolheiser says, in the world's schema of things, survival of the fittest is the rule. In God's schema, survival of the weakest is the rule. God always stands on the side of the weak, and it is there among the weak that we find God. Weakness in aging can take many forms, and each of us may fear a particular type more than others. For instance, My husband, who is an athlete, which I am not, fears physical weakness in a way that I do not. He is an avid golfer. For those of you who are unfamiliar with golf, where you hit the ball towards the hole is spaced differently for pros, for men, for women, and for seniors. This is an attempt to make it equitable depending on skill level and muscle strength. Pros have the longest distance to hit, followed by men, then women, since they do not have the same upper body strength as men. There are also senior tees for men, which are designed for the normal decline in muscle strength in the aging process. My husband Steve is well past the age when he is allowed to use that senior tee position, but he does not yet. To maintain his strength, he works out with weights at the gym, determined to stay as strong as possible for as long as possible. We touch lightly for now on the time when that will no longer work. For now, he's grateful and savors what he can do, knowing it will not last forever. So what type of weakness do you fear the most? I suspect in general, it's different for men than women, in part because weakness intends vulnerability, and there are definitely gender differences around this. Arthur Brooks wrote an excellent book titled From Strength to Strength. In it, he discusses the weakness arising from old age. He says, to see weakness as purely negative is a mistake. It's also an opportunity to connect more deeply with others, to see the sacredness in suffering, even to find new areas of growth and success. Stop hiding it and don't resist it. Now, I did some marital counseling when I was a therapist, and a book I often had couples read was called How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It. Kind of a funny title for a therapist to recommend, but it was useful to see and understand the gender differences in men and women. Of greatest importance here is the reality that men are both biologically and socially inclined to hide their vulnerability, often being chastised and shamed as young boys for crying or being seen as weak. When they feel weak, men withdraw to be by themselves, hence the origin of man cave. On the other hand, women are naturally soothed by being in relationship, sharing their vulnerabilities. There's no shame in that for women, and a typical way that women soothe themselves is to talk about it, to share their problems with another woman who might say things like, I know what you mean. I have felt the same way. And in this give and take of vulnerability, a biological soothing actually occurs. Now, this is quite different from the compounding of shame that men feel when exposed in their vulnerability. Of course, there are individual differences, but in general, women are more comfortable with this sharing of weakness and benefit from the bonding and nurturing that comes from it. What is more difficult for women is accepting care from others rather than being the one who gives the care. It's important to respect these differences, but consider this idea that weakness of aging can give both men and women the opportunity to connect with a more nurturing part of themselves without being ashamed. This asks old men to experience a new type of strength in the context of spiritual growth, and old women to allow others to nurture them as they have nurtured others. It takes courage, but with a mature perspective, it can be humbling, not humiliating. One of the paradoxes of aging is both the lack of time remaining and the possibility of becoming more tuned in to the present moment. Many people still remain too busy, whether because of automatic habits, desire to do it all like in the old days, or maybe because being busy is a distraction. Anthony DeMello, the Jesuit who invited us to behold God, beholding you and smiling, was a keen student of the way we prevent ourselves from being present to God's presence. To illustrate, he tells this parable, and it goes like this. The animals met in assembly and began to complain that the humans were always taking things away from them. They take my milk, said the cow. They take my eggs, said the hen. They take my flesh for bacon, said the hog. They hunt me for my oil, said the whale, and so on. Finally, the snail spoke. I have something they would like to have more than anything else, something they would certainly take away from me if they could. I have time. DeMello goes on to challenge, you have all the time in the world if you would only give it to yourself. What's stopping you? So, ask yourself this. How busy am I? So busy that I feel I never have enough time? Or do I castigate myself for having too much time on my hands and not feeling important? How can I stop automatically saying yes to things and then feeling exhausted? What old rules am I unconsciously following about how I pace myself? Will I listen to the body's cues and rest when needed? All of these are really important questions. A recent daily meditation from Henry Nouwen was titled, The Divine Choice of Weakness. And it says in part, God chose to enter into human history in complete weakness. That divine choice forms the center of the Christian faith. In Jesus of Nazareth, the powerless God appeared among us to unmask the illusion of power, to disarm the prince of darkness who rules the world, and to bring the divided human race to a new unity. It is through total and unmitigated powerlessness that God shows us divine mercy. It is very hard, if not impossible, for us to grasp this divine mercy. We keep praying to the almighty and powerful God, but all might and power is absent from the one who reveals God to us, saying, when you see me, you see the Father. If we truly want to love God, we have to look at the man of Nazareth, whose life was wrapped in weakness. And his weakness opens for us the way to the heart of God. Powerful words from Henry Nouwen. And it's a powerful invitation for us to be transformed through our weakness rather than relying on our strength. I also want to give you two examples that show a contrast between the fruitfulness that being weak and vulnerable can yield and how it can reinforce loneliness and suffering. Please know that I use these examples with the utmost tenderness for both. Recently, my older brother, Bob, began to experience weakness and shortness of breath when walking. He began the medical journey trying to find out what was causing both. Now, Bob is a very tough guy with a big heart. Of course, I stayed in closer contact with him during this time, and he kept saying how loved he felt with so many people calling him, praying for him, and attending to him in his weakness. This is fruitfulness. The good news is that his physicians finally figured it out. They placed a stent in the iliac artery, which leads to the legs, and all his symptoms disappeared. Bob is more appreciative than ever of the love and care he's received and the joy of being active again. In the way of mystery and miracles, his heart was clear and the shortness of breath was gone. His doctors say that there is no medical explanation for why that symptom cleared. Now, on a funny note, he was also greatly relieved that they didn't tell him he couldn't eat ice cream anymore. Now, the other example is of a person who has been very closed his whole life. He recently was hospitalized and near death. Miraculously, he survived. And when a family member called to connect with him and share joy at his recovery, he brushed it off and acted like nothing serious had been wrong. He basically kept his high walls around him. I say this with the greatest of compassion, not knowing what he's been through in his life that keeps him so invulnerable to the love and care offered to him. This represents a seed of love that falls on ground that is rocky and hard. There is still love there, but it will not flourish in this person's lifetime unless he is cracked open in some mysterious way. Let us pray for him and for the wounded parts in ourselves that protect our souls from the love we need. There's a bit of hell in this for everyone. It takes a lot of energy to pretend or deny that something is happening. I want to share another story from Anthony DeMello. It can be applied to any of the so-called weaknesses that show up in your aging body and mind. DeMello writes, "He was becoming blind by degrees. He fought it with every means in his power. When medicine no longer served to fight it, he fought it with his emotions. It took courage to say to him, 'I suggest you learn to love your blindness.' It was a struggle. He refused to have anything to do with it in the beginning. And when he eventually brought himself to speak to his blindness, his words were bitter. But he kept on speaking, and the words slowly changed into words of resignation and tolerance and acceptance. And one day, very much to his own surprise, they became words of friendliness and love. Then came the day when he was able to put his arm around his blindness and say, 'I love you.' And that was the day I saw him smile again. His vision, of course, was lost forever, but how attractive his face became." Though this may seem silly to do for some of you, having a conversation with your weakness can bring about your own transformation of acceptance and peace. You can do this while alone on a walk, or by writing in your journal, or even using collage or music or some type of artistic expression. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of as I acknowledge this weakness? Am I afraid that by doing so, I will get weaker? Or that people will look down on me as maybe I did out of pride or ignorance in the past? How can I let in the peace that God is offering to me? Finding the unexpected peace in old age is greatly helped by developing a contemplative mindset and practice. Henry Nouwen promotes contemplation as a way to enter more deeply into the mystery of divine life while remaining fully engaged in the struggles of our hate and fear-filled world. He further says that contemplative life is a human response to the fundamental fact that the central things in life, although spiritually perceptible, remain invisible in large measure and can very easily be overlooked by the inattentive, busy, distracted person that each of us so readily become. The contemplative looks not so much around things, but through them into their center. Through their center, he discovers the world of spiritual beauty that is more real, has more density, more mass, more energy, and greater intensity than physical matter. In effect, the beauty of physical matter is a reflection of its inner content. In a minute, I will talk about some references for developing a daily contemplative practice if you do not have one. But first, I want to mention one of those mysterious ways that our aging body can mellow us and pull us downward into the territory of soul. It's both simple and profound, a physical gift and a spiritual one. It's about the challenge and the joy of having to slow down. Why slow down? Wonder increases as speed decreases. As we cover less ground, we uncover more. As we narrow the field of view, our horizons expand. Monks and poets know this. So too can a wise old man or woman who has ceased the endless busyness that is a modern-day plague. In the physical act of speed, you can ride a bike and cover a lot of territory. Take a walk, and you cover less distance, but see more detail. Walk with a cane so slowly that you are invited to be in community with what is around you. Can you see the gift? And think about times when you have been stilled by the wonder of something you are experiencing, like a sunset, or a birth, or a death, or seeing a father carrying his toddler. It's unlikely to happen when you are racing around. If you don't fight it, it's a wonderful side effect of having to slow down. I want to say a few words about meditation. One of the resources, if you want to meditate with a specifically Christian focus, is from the World Community of Christian Meditation. And I encourage you to explore their website. On it, they talk about why meditation is important on the spiritual path, saying, meditation is a universal spiritual wisdom and a practice found at the core of all the great religious traditions. It leads the practitioner from mind to heart and to the integration of these two centers of human being. The second resource has a slightly different technique than Christian meditation, but both are great ways to enter into stillness. Centering prayer is described as a receptive method of Christian silent prayer, which deepens our relationship with God, the indwelling presence. A prayer in which we can experience God's presence within us, closer than breathing, closer than thinking, closer than consciousness itself. The third reference is a reference to traditionally Buddhist practice, mindfulness, which has also been secularized. It is used widely in places from schools to medical settings. It's well researched and documented to help with chronic pain, stress, and other conditions. These are in addition to the spiritual benefits from practicing mindfulness. It helps people to become aware of the present moment with a non-judgmental attitude that is kind and compassionate. There are many YouTube videos available for those of you who would like to get a taste of mindfulness. I also recommend the book, Looking at Mindfulness. It uses art as a way to become more present and compassionate. In the Forest Dwelling program, we encourage people to develop a daily contemplative practice. We don't specify which type, and it's been my experience that it's more important to find the type of meditation that you will actually stick with. You may need to try a variety of methods before finding the one that best suits you. I've been practicing meditation daily for over 10 years, and I can say that it has opened my heart and mind in a way that is hard to explain, but is very real. It has taught me the importance of sitting quietly in the solitude of God's presence without engaging so much with thinking. I firmly believe that it's a necessary part of becoming a spiritual elder if you are so inclined. Now, learning the discipline and joy of solitude is helpful. As the philosopher Paul Tillich says, solitude expresses the glory of being alone, whereas loneliness expresses the pain of feeling alone. Now, we know that loneliness is a particularly acute pain for humans, and many people who are aging experience the loneliness of outliving a spouse, friends from younger days, or simply feeling marginalized and alone. Solitude is cultivated as we sit in stillness while doing a contemplative practice, but some people do it by connecting more deeply with God in the wonders of nature. The poet Mary Oliver says this quite beautifully in her poem, Loneliness. I too have known loneliness. I too have known what it is to feel misunderstood, rejected, and suddenly not at all beautiful. Oh, Mother Earth, your comfort is great. Your arms never withhold. It has saved my life to know this. Your rivers flowing, your roses opening in the morning, oh, motions of tenderness. We're coming to the end of the first video series, and as we do so, I want to mention that it takes time to process the information you are receiving, to ground it within you. For this reason, we made the Forest Dwelling program a 2-year journey. It takes a sustained commitment to move from information to formation, from head to heart, from an idea to making it part of who you are. Of course, the transformation is done by God in God's own time and way. I've included this slide as an opportunity to reflect on some of the questions we address in the Forest Dwelling program. You may want to stop and reflect on these questions. Please take the time to slow down, open to wonder, and see where it takes you. I'm going to finish today with this blessing from Jan Richardson. Lazarus' blessing. The secret of this blessing is that it is written on the back of what binds you. To read this blessing, you must take hold of the end of what confines you, must begin to tug at the edge of what wraps you round. It may take long and long for its length to fall away, for the words of this blessing to unwind in folds about your feet. By then, you will no longer need them. By then, this blessing will have pressed itself into your waking flesh, will have passed into your bones, will have traveled every vein, until it comes to rest inside the chambers of your heart that beats to the rhythm of benediction and the cadence of release. He cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Thank you for being part of this first series of the Taste of the Forest journey. For those of you who are interested in coming together on Zoom, we will see you next week. Emmett will send you the link for Tuesday, July 30th from 6 to 7:15 p.m. Central Daylight Time, when we will meet and see what is unfolding in your journey. At this time, I also want to thank Emmett for the beautiful slides he put together and for all the technological expertise that is necessary to bring this to you. See you soon.